Yes. So the latest news, which seems to change every week. A couple weeks ago, we heard that they filed confidentially with the SEC. So another one of these, somehow we all know in the press that they filed confidentially, which sort of defeats. It's like how everyone's in stealth mode. It's not stealth mode unless people know you're in stealth mode.
Right.
But what we heard from Bloomberg this week was that Palantir has plans to direct list in late September. And that's interesting because, unlike Slack and some of the other companies, including Airbnb, have considered or have actually done a direct listing, Palantir is not as, I think, popularly well known as a company. It's an enterprise data infrastructure play, mostly focused on
Yes.
government. It has migrated into healthcare and other enterprises over the last couple of years. The direct listing makes less sense, except I think Palantir may well be the most secondary transacted private market company like in the valley today. So the flip side of this is actually, I think the comps have been out there for so long and there's been so many transactions, it actually might make a lot of sense.
So I love you, Danny, but I don't follow that. Why does the preponderance of secondary transactions before the IPO or direct listing make it more reasonable for there to be a direct listing?
I think, anytime you do a roadshow, the whole goal is to sell the vision of the company and to convince people that there is value here at a certain price, right? You're trying
Yeah.
to convince folks that Slack should be worth X number of dollars, Palantir should be worth 20 billion, which is the valuation they've been looking at the last couple of months.
Right.
The more that you've done those secondary transactions, that means there's more investors out in the real world, on Wall Street, on family offices, in big banks that have come to an opinion about what a company is worth, right? We always talk about that pop and the complaints that pops are now like 2-3x of the valuation. And that's partly because you've done this accelerated show of like, hey, everyone, in 2 weeks, we're all going to convince you why we're worth 40 billion bucks.
Right.
I think that because Palantir has been so transacted from what I've heard on the secondary markets, you have maybe thousands of people who have come to an opinion of what it's worth, which means there's a lot of depth of capital that will support that price when it goes public.
Possibly, but I don't think anyone has a good grip on the numbers, because one thing that we've seen in the Palantir, history in the timeline of this company is they're always about to reach $1 billion and they're always about to become profitable. And that's been true for like 5 years. So I'm very curious to see growth in the last couple of years, how much of the revenue is recurring, how much of it's high margin, how much of it's just services, and to see what the company looks like. I am incredibly excited to see what it actually is versus what we're told that it is. And I think the S1 is going to be a really great document for that. I mean, also, I feel like we've been talking about Palantir going public since like the middle of the second
80s.
Obama administration. Yeah, it's been so long.
It's the fifth coming of Palantir's IPO. So
I have a question. I feel like with Airbnb, we talk so much about like the window where they can go public that makes sense. Does Palantir have like any reason to choose late September? Is this just another leak that's giving them another roadshow of press? I guess I'm unsure to like try and understand why Palantir picked late September, allegedly.
I think there's less seasonality. I think there's a couple of dynamics here. One that is interesting to pay attention to is not only the U.S. election, which I think gets kind of the obvious correlation. It's actually the government budgeting cycle, right, which starts on I believe in August. I could be wrong. It's either October or November. It's an October 1 fiscal, right? So by going public in September, they're locking in all the contracts for the previous year before the new contracts are necessarily public. And that's just one of those dynamics that, again, you're going to have to teach people a lot about, because there's not a lot of technology investors who also invest in, government procurement startups.
Really? There's not?
There is not, Alex.
Wow.
But I do think there are some, not like in seasonality in the quarterly sense, where Airbnb obviously in Q1 is always really bad because it's post-Christmas and no one actually travels or has tourism. Palantir does have seasonality, but it might be over the course of years based on budget cycles and how people procure in those markets.
That makes it a really attractive play for investors who are into very rock solid, consistent revenue gains. That was sarcasm.
That was sarcasm.
Yeah. So I have to start saying that.